Today we begin our journey in China's Kubuqi Desert, a place that people once did not simply call a desert, they called it the Sea of Death, because here, life meant slowly disappearing. Every year, nearly 500,000 acres of land were silently buried beneath the sand. Fertile land turned into desert right before people's eyes. Vegetation dried up, and people were forced to abandon their homes and leave. Everywhere, there were only waves of sand and scorching winds, and a silence that seemed to say that life was losing its battle to survive. But the most frightening thing was that this desert was not standing still. It was spreading, little by little. Every year, nearly 500,000 acres of land disappeared beneath the sand. Entire villages, farmland, and roads were slowly being erased. This process has a name: desertification. Simply put, it is when places that once supported life gradually turn into desert, and Kubuqi was one of the largest examples of it. At one point, the desert was expanding so rapidly that it seemed impossible to stop, but China did not give up. The country tried again and again to halt the advance of the desert. Trees were planted, sand control stations were built, massive projects were launched, and billions of dollars were invested. Yet nothing seemed able to stop this vast ocean of sand. No matter how hard they tried, it felt as though they were slowly losing the battle. There is a terrifying characteristic of deserts. Once they begin to expand, stopping them becomes incredibly difficult. Then, one man came forward with an idea that made everyone laugh at first. His name was Wang Wanbiao. He began doing something unusual. Spending all of his savings and taking on debt, he started with many considered madness. He brought in more than 100 bulldozers and 300 workers. Day after day, work continued for 18 hours at a time. Across the desert, they began creating small squares using dry shrubs, and inside those squares, they started planting willow trees. This was no ordinary tree. Its roots can reach deep underground, extending nearly 300 feet in search of water. In places where almost no other tree could survive, the willow could create its own opportunity. But the challenges did not end there. The desert winds were so powerful that it was difficult for these young trees to survive. The wind carried away sand and stripped the soil of its remaining moisture. As a result, many trees died before they could establish themselves. So Wang introduced a new strategy. He surrounded the planting areas with shrubs, creating barriers that protected the trees from direct winds and helped retain moisture. This small idea slowly became the beginning of a major transformation. People were still laughing. They called him crazy, a man planting trees in the middle of a desert. But he did not stop. Not for one day, not for 2 days. He continued the same work for years. Gradually, some trees survived. Some roots reached deep into the ground. The movement of sand began to slow. It felt as if the impossible was slowly becoming possible. But then another major challenge appeared. To keep the trees alive, they required constant care. New branches had to be trimmed regularly. Otherwise, the trees would not become strong or grow properly. In a desert of this size, that task was nearly impossible. Hiring people to do it would be extremely expensive, and it would take an enormous amount of time. So who was going to do this work? Who could manage such a system across such a vast landscape? And this is where the story takes a surprising turn. A task that seemed almost impossible for humans was taken over by a small animal, the rabbit. A special breed known as the Rex rabbit was introduced. These rabbits are often called white gold because their fur is so soft and valuable that a high-quality pelt can sell for as much as $30. Yet raising a rabbit costs only about $2. That means more than 15 times the return from a single animal. But that is not the real story. The real story lies in one of their simple habits. Rex rabbits love eating the young and tender shoots of willow trees. As they began feeding on the new shoots, the main trunks of the trees became thicker, stronger, and more durable. In other words, the very task that humans had to perform repeatedly. pruning branches to strengthen the trees, was now being done naturally by the rabbits themselves. And that was not all. The rabbits made another important contribution through their waste. It may sound strange, but their manure became a powerful natural fertilizer. Gradually, life began returning to the dry and nearly lifeless soil. There was another surprise as well. The rabbits fed on grass, but they could not completely digest the grass seeds. As a result, many of those seeds returned to the soil. Before long, areas that would once been nothing but sand began to show signs of growing grass. A small cycle had been created. Nature and animals were now working together. Little by little, the sand began to stabilize. Moisture started remaining in the soil. The wind could no longer carry away sand as easily as before. And within a few years, what had once been a dead desert slowly began turning green. But the story does not end there. This transformation did not stop with the environment. It spread into people's lives as well. Local residents were encouraged to raise rabbits. Homes began turning into small farms. Rabbit fur could be sold. The trees also started providing valuable raw materials. Gradually, people began earning an income. Those who had once fled the desert started returning. Year after year, the process continued. Eventually, a large portion of the Kubuqi Desert became covered in greenery. The place once known only as the Sea of Death was changing. The people who had abandoned it returned once again. But Wang did not stop there. In the middle of the desert, he built a massive solar power plant. Using 196,000 solar panels, the installation was designed in the shape of a running horse. This power plant generates 2.3 billion kilowatt hours of electricity every year, enough to supply around 400,000 people. But there is another twist. These solar panels do more than generate electricity. They reduce wind speed by as much as 50%. At the same time, they create shade beneath them, and under that shade, grass begins to grow. That grass is then eaten by rabbits, sheep, and ducks. A completely new ecosystem emerges, one where technology and nature work together. Today, this model is no longer limited to China. Countries across Spain, Africa, and the Middle East have begun adopting similar approaches. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of this story. No matter how much people laugh at you, you must remain committed to your goal. Why give up your dream because of someone else's laughter? Because throughout history, the people who achieved great things were often the same people others laughed at in the beginning. Now, the decision is yours.